show we have 14 individuals here, which is a quorum, and it is 5:32. Start on your watch.
Okay, I will go ahead and call this meeting of the Citizens Advisory Council or Citizens Advisory Committee of the General Obligation Bond to order at 5:32 on Wednesday, October 16th. I want to thank all of you for being here tonight. I apologize. I know that when people are on meetings virtually, it can be clunky. So my apologies, but I had a pre-planned trip to be out of town. So thank you for understanding. I do want to quickly, before we move into business, I just wanted to thank everybody for their attendance at our recent tours. I know that we had two separate groups, so we didn't all get a chance to see each other, but I'm sure you feel the same way as I, that there was just some very enlightening things that we learned and had a chance to go deeper on some of the issues and ask questions. So just want to thank all of you for giving of your evening to be part of that most recent engagement. And I certainly want to thank city staff who not only for that event, but have continued to work overtime to support all of this study effort, both during the work hours and outside. Your work is not unnoticed, and we certainly appreciate all of your extra efforts around that. So just wanted to make those opening comments. We will go ahead and move into our agenda. And the first thing we would like to do is ask for approval of the meeting minutes from the meeting of September the 18th. And at this time, I would be happy to entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve, but I would like to see added to this the discussion on the whether or not abated properties are eligible to have the increase on the GO bond if approved. And Mr. Walker, I think that that would really be a good topic for our next meeting.
Noted, and we'll get that for you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve the minutes with the addition of a note that during that meeting, a discussion was brought up questioning or asking city staff to inquire about the status of abated properties in our community and how they would be subject to a potential tax increase related to the GO bond. So we have that addition to the minutes. So with that motion and amendment being made, is there a second to that motion?
Second.
So we have a motion by Lucy, and we have a second, and I'm sorry I didn't catch who seconded that.
Michelle.
And a second by Michelle. At this time, is there any discussion about the minutes? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor of approving the minutes with the amendment, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed, please say nay. Madam City Clerk, I couldn't necessarily hear the votes. Did the approval of the minutes with the amendment pass?
Doug, this is the city manager, and it passed unanimously.
Okay, the meeting minutes have passed unanimously. All right, at this point, we have approved the meeting minutes, and at this time, I'm going to, I think all of us are aware that this is making up a piece of our agenda tonight. And for those of you that have been present and the continuation of information that has been presented, know that we were expecting some refined cost updates, specifically as it relates to the proposed Justice Center and the proposed Community Recreation Center. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Zach to begin an updated presentation for everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, members of the committee. As the chairman said, my name is Zach Walker, the city manager. And if you'll indulge just a moment, we're going to make sure that we toggle the screen so that Doug is able to see the presentation from his location as well. Okay. Well, I know that there is a lot of deliberation to be done by this committee, and many of you are probably eager to begin to have those conversations. So I intend for this to really just be very brief presentation. I'll, of course, stand for any questions that you have afterwards, but going to try to be pretty perfunctory with the remarks here. Just to recap for the committee, it's been a couple of weeks since you met, so we thought we would remind you that when this group first gathered, you were presented with a $250 million plan allocated across several different categories representing multiple city departments in Independence. When Councilmember John Perkins, who is your liaison from the City Council to this committee, addressed you a few weeks ago, gave you a challenge of identifying how much the bond package itself should total, what categories should be included in that plan, and then the amount being allocated to each of those spending categories. So this is just a recap of what those original numbers looked like. We're going to start by talking about the community center, but just a quick reminder for everybody on that. Let's see if we can make this thing advance to the next slide. Okay. One of the primary reasons we've been talking about a recreation center is the economic impact that it has on the Independence Square and by association, the western side of town. This is a slide that's a little bit dated now, but using some of that cellular tracking information that government loves to get, we were able to kind of pinpoint our visitors to the square, which is about 1.1 million as of a few years ago, and noticed that about a total of 9,800 visitors annually, or 28,000 total visits, happen as a result of people coming directly to City Hall. The point of this slide really is just to remind you that City Hall as a function is really not a great economic engine for the square. There's a lot of other awesome assets on the square, but the people that are coming in to pay a traffic ticket aren't probably the ones that are in a mood to hang around and go buy a hot dog at Updog. And this is from your last presentation, just a reminder that this is not an Independence-specific issue. Cities large and small, post-COVID, are experiencing the challenge of bringing workforce and density back to their downtowns. This is something I know your fellow committee member, Jeff Rogers, works on every day, finding the unique, fun, exciting ways to get people to come out of their homes and come experience the Independence Square. And we want to be, as a city, supportive of that effort as well. So this is just a reminder of how your Independence Square looks today. If you were to do a flyover, this is what you would see. And my impression, and what I would impress upon you, is that post-urban renewal, there's a lot of space on our square that is either underutilized or is not developed in such a way as to be an active part of economic vibrancy in our downtown core. You see a lot of surface parking lots in this area, just again, a lot of underutilized space. But where this committee overlaps with our current work on redeveloping the Independence Square, in our master redevelopment plan that's going to the City Council next month, we call this specific area Focus Area 2. And this is your current City Hall, police station, and the parking associated for employees at both of those sites. And as a reminder for the committee, we envision, assuming a bond passes, that the police station is no longer on that corner. It's relocated to the area you're in tonight. City Hall has gone away at that point in time, and that leaves an opportunity for a new recreation complex. So want to give compliments to our friends at PGAV Architects who have provided these renderings for us on a very compressed timeline, so I really want to thank them for their work. But this is a schematic that they have prepared of what such a facility could look like. You can see compared to the Sermon Center that you toured 2 weeks ago, a lot more natural light, a lot more modern looking facility that is use specific, not retrofitting a building like the Sermon Center is. On the next slide, you get a better sense of the potential layout. This site has some pretty significant grade to it, running west to east. So taking advantage and developing on that grade, this is kind of seen in 3 tiers. The lower level would be that natatorium indoor pool area that we talked about. The main level would have the basketball, or I should say multi-use courts, basketball, volleyball, and pickleball. And then the upper levels, you'll see here in a moment, would have that elevated walking track and some of those workout facilities. So this is a look if you were coming inside the building. This is the reception area. This is where customers to the rec center would be greeted and provide a lot more welcoming environment than what you experience today. This is a look at those courts. In this image, you can see people playing pickleball, but you can also see the basketball hoops there as well. Bleachers for when this event is in use for tournament type activities. Those are included and provided as well. And then this is a look at that elevated walking track that would encircle the courts. Off to the side, you can see the workout facility and amenities over there as well. So as a reminder, again, this was originally 18 months ago, thought to be a $75 million facility. I told you in a presentation back on September 18th that there's pretty aggressive escalations in the construction market right now. And you will see that reflected on this slide, which shows that on the low end, this is now an $84 million facility. At the high end, $94 million. The variance in there really just accounts for how aggressive we think the market is going to continue to evolve. I can tell you, talking to my peers in the city of Lenexa, they budgeted a certain amount for their police station, and then with the quick change in the economy and the construction industry, they've had to go back and reinvent their police station to match the budget that they do have, not the reality of what they thought they were going to be able to build. So that's why we have a variance, a range here in this. The Justice Center is the other piece we owed you some follow-up information on. You've seen this slide before, but this is just a reminder that the building you're in would occupy a significant portion of the police department headquarters. Headed from east towards west would be an extension that would be added on to include municipal court. The detention unit is a part of this, as well as additional office space for police department. Not visible in this particular rendering are the additional special op functions, since we talked about the consolidated campus. There's, when you're talking about building a residential home, or you're talking about building even a commercial office building, those are unique costs. A police facility is a lot different animal. There's a lot of specialized equipment, technology developments that have to be anticipated and incorporated. So we thought, based on Grain Valley, who built their facility just about 18 months ago or so, that this was a project that would be roughly in the neighborhood of $651 a square foot. Multiplying that by that 2018 report that we saw, we anticipated this to be about a $42 million project. Our team has worked, again, I want to give compliments and credits, very hard to get you a range on this. To build out the full Justice Center with a consolidated campus is now anticipated to be a $125 million project. The benefit here is, again, those consolidated operations. And Chief Dustman worked with his command staff to provide what I think is some important context for you. Right now, for these decentralized operations, think the K-9 unit, the bomb squad, SWAT team, things like that, travel between their site-specific offices to police headquarters. We estimate in fuel and man hours about $57,000 a year is spent in productivity and fuel. If that facility is located here, as we envision, some of those functions are going to be further away. It goes from about roughly 3 miles to 4.4 miles total distance from the furthest out facility. That is going to be about 3 times the cost in fuel and man time to travel from those far distances. So though that 125 number is significantly higher than 42, we did want you to know it would be over 3 times the cost in personnel and fuel if we did not centralize these functions. We understand that $125 million has sticker shock. We had a lot of sticker shock. So Assistant City Manager Lisa Reynolds and our owner's rep on this project, not exaggerating to say, worked throughout the night to try to figure out how they could slim this down while still being somewhat functional. A really stripped down facility here would be $96.5 million. That would include renovating this facility to make it safe and functional for police use. It would include all the grading and site work that has to happen to make construction happen here. It would add the municipal court, the detention facility, and the police offices. I want you to notice what is not included in this. All those specialized units, the ability to have the covered parking that we spoke to, firing range. We've had a big conversation with Chief Dustman about this yesterday, and I'm going to use the term hardship that would cause of trying to cohabitate with a different jurisdiction, competing for time in the firing range. This would be a challenge, but this is the best we can get to. This is the lowest number that we could bring this down and still have a functional police facility over here. So I wanted to kind of give you a side-by-side comparison on this. So again, you can see how we got to the $250 million here. On that low end, if we think of our rec center as an $84 million project and a justice center at 96.5, that's coming in still at $314 million. If you go on the high end for both of those projects, that's $352 million. I, as the city manager, cannot in good conscience recommend a project, a bond package that's over $300 million. One, there's a multitude of reasons, but 2 that I think I'll share tonight. One is this is a community where 15% of your fellow residents live below the federal poverty line, and I think we've got to be cognizant of the community that we serve and their capacity to bear increased property tax. 2, the city still has some pretty significant debt service, annual appropriation debt from economic development projects. We have to be very thoughtful about, as we issue more debt, what will that do to the city's credit rating? In speaking with our financial advisor and bond counsel earlier this week, they felt comfortable going above $250 million, but also encouraged us, wouldn't say recommended, but encouraged us to stay below that $300 million threshold. So I'm basing my recommendation to you on that. I just want to summarize then by showing you again in a range what that fiscal impact would look like. You can see here what the estimated annual debt service would be, and then per $100 of assessed valuation, what you're talking about in terms of fiscal impact. And if you'll remember the financial advisor that was here a couple of weeks ago, he, as a funnel, sort of zoned in on median home value, what that looks like at an annual, a monthly, and a daily cost, and then finally per $100,000 value of home. So if you have a $200,000 home, double it, $300,000, triple it, so on and so forth. So, Mr. Chairman, as I said, I would stand for questions, but kind of renewing Councilmember Perkins' challenge, what we really hope the committee can focus on starting now is what is that total bond package? What categories get included in this? And then at what level are those various categories funded? So I'm going to yield back to you, Mr. Chair, and let you run your meeting from there.
Zach, thank you for this presentation. And in just a second, I would like to open it up to our committee to ask any clarifying questions around the Rec Center and the Justice Center, along with any of the recommendations of Bond Council. And I don't mean to go backwards in the meeting, but I'm looking at my notes and I remember that I forgot to welcome any guests that might be attending the meeting tonight. This is a public meeting, and so wanted to thank any of our fellow citizens who are joining us, whether they're joining us online, watching this taped, or here in person tonight. So I just wanted to welcome any attendees that are not committee members. So if you would, when you have a question, if you would turn your microphone on, but at this time, I would open it up to the committee for clarifying questions on the information that the city manager has presented tonight.
This is Danielle. I have some capacity questions on the the recreational center, and you know, I think the photos are beautiful, but and I know the idea is to start hosting some youth tournaments, but like how many courts are we talking? How many memberships are we expecting annually? Do we have any of those types of ideas? And actually annual membership costs too, because I think those are gonna be questions that we're gonna get asked.
I will defer to the Director of Parks and Recreation, but if you'll give him just a moment to gather himself and come forward.
Thank you.
Again, my name is Morris Heidi, Director of Parks, Recreation, and Tourism. Excuse me. We just finalized today a pro forma for the new community center. So we do have that information available. The current facility we're looking at would have three in essence basketball courts that would be subdivided into 9 pickleball courts and 6 volleyball courts. The limited amount of gym space would allow us to probably have tournaments for 12 and under age groups. It wouldn't be the mega tournaments for all age groups, but 12 and under. Don't really have a number on what, how many different tournaments that would be at this point. We've also, for that pro forma, we have ran some numbers for the number of memberships, and we have a lot of information here. We basically have resident or non-resident memberships, so individual, families. We set it up to have add-ons for, if it's 2 adults with 1 child or 2 adults with several children, kind of a menu pricing, if you will. So basically, it's an entire sheet. I mean, I could literally read it out, but I'm not sure that would be very conducive at this point. So to give you a total membership number, again, depends on the category. If it's individual, family, et cetera, we probably have, 30 categories, if you will, 35. So.
How about just like an individual cost and then maybe like a family with
Sure.
children?
So I can give you, so we are basing this on a monthly individual resident membership would be $35. And bear in mind, this is looking 4.5 years out. So this is 28, close to 2029, based on construction. So that's not today's dollars. So 35 for an individual membership. For a resident. For a non-resident would be $45 a month. Annual membership for a resident would be $378, so for the entire year. Annual non-resident membership would be $486. Then we have like monthly couples would be $60 a month. for monthly couples annually would be 756. So just a few examples. Again, I could continue on if you'd like me to, but
How about just like a family with 2 children?
let's see here. For a resident, and then of course we have, 65 plus, that's a cheaper rate. So a resident, so annual couples plus. So monthly household, 2 adults with 2 kids would be $83.
So pretty similar to what the YMCA was before they left.
That could be, I'm not sure what their rates were.
Yeah, it's pretty close.
Mr. Chairman, Lucy here. Mr. Heidi,
Mhm.
we just saw the city council have a discussion on whether or not they should close the Adventure Oasis. What plan do you have to ensure that the swimming pool, if it's added to this, has maintenance?
That is a great question. We actually have in the pro forma, there's actually some capital funding already figured into that. So not large capital, but that would include like, excuse me, the pumps and motors that unfortunately were not budgeted for the Adventure Oasis Water Park. So it wouldn't include, say, a new roofing install of, several $1,000,000. That's not included. But part of that, and it may seem high on those monthly or annual membership, but a lot of that is going back into a fund to help ensure that we don't repeat what we've done in the past. Really keying in on, we have to reinvest in the facilities. And if we don't do that, obviously we end up, pick a number, 5, 10, 15 years down the road. In the case of Adventure Oasis, 19 years later, we haven't reinvested back into that facility. So the plan is not to do that at this point. Again, there would have to be a separate capital fund for very large, fixing the parking garage at some future point, new roof systems, things like that. But smaller capital items are included in the budget.
Yeah, Randall Pratt. I like the answer that the the community center, rec center ought to be around the square because that selfishly is convenient for me. But I want to step back and maybe poke on that a little bit. In Legacy Park, I go there for birthday parties. This is the Lee Summit Community Center. It sits in the middle, I think, of 400 to 500 acres of space, and they have baseball fields, soccer fields around it. If we locate it here in the square area, there's not synergy between outdoor recreation spaces and indoor recreation spaces. In a sense, I think we ought to think bigger than this. If we really want this to be a significant asset of the city that brings in new residents and makes the mark, I'm not sure that this really has as much splash as we want to have. So I'd be interested to know, have other locations been considered, and why is this the best location for this recreation center today?
I'll defer to Cindy.
Mr. Pratt, the Parks Department, though there have been many Parks master plans that have called for a new recreation complex, have not, to my knowledge, engaged in a deep analysis of site selection. Admittedly, we have told, as city management, Morris, that we wanted to try to do this project at this site as part of a larger redevelopment project for the square, as a mechanism to try to attract more people in the non-peak hours. I live near the square. When you all leave after 5 o'clock, it's pretty lonely up there. And we're trying to find a way to create more density and vibrancy that will support the businesses present and future. So that is purely a thought. There's no definitive research or study necessarily behind it that I can provide you. And that's, I think, certainly appropriate for this committee to discuss if you are so inclined. But I want to make sure it's stated for the record that this is more of city management and the master developer's thought process on a redevelopment opportunity than it is any wisdom that the Parks Department has done through feasibility studies or site selection analysis or anything like that.
And then I also have another question. I know, and it's been a while since I've heard about it, but there was a hotel study done on the square. Are there still continued plans to place a hotel on the square?
Without going into too much detail, there's not been any plans submitted, but we've certainly had some meetings with some folks about that opportunity.
Question. How much is would the annual operating and maintenance cost be, and what do you project revenues to be?
Great question. So at this point, we would have revenues. So again, this is fiscal year 29, so July 1, 28 to June 30, 2029. For that fiscal year, we would be projecting $2,959,000 and $959,988. So $2,959,988. Expenses would be $4,751,653. So that's a deficit of $1,791,000 roughly. Currently, our funding for the Sermon Center and the Palmer Center is $1,594,000. Well, let me back up. Again, $29. So based on today's dollars. So if you add in the park sales tax that is currently supplementing community center operations, we'd have a net deficit of $197,000. So I went through that rather quickly. Everybody get that, or do I need to repeat those numbers?
So this means closing down Palmer and closing down Sermon Center?
Correct. The original vision was really to combine, and prior to this fiscal year, True Memorial Building had a portion of recreation in that facility. So the idea would be to combine all three of those facilities, the recreation portion, into this new facility. Correct.
Another question is, the square plan calls for some rerouting streets and utilities. You have to demolish City Hall, the police building. What will that total cost be to prepare a site for a recreation center and to have utilities for it?
Let's see, we have an estimate on some, I can't speak to the streets, so I don't know if Lisa or city manager want to speak to that, but let's see, or do you want to?
Zach, perhaps maybe a question is, and I think Larry's question is a very good one. Are those numbers to prepare a site for construction? Are those included in the numbers that were presented tonight? And I realize that those, when you get close to $85 million, there's a lot of numbers to consider. But is some of that site work and additional plans included in the total number presented?
The only figure that is not included in that is the demolition of the police station, which we would anticipate being able to complete out of existing revenues. The site work costs associated with the community center include the grading and utilities type things that Mr. Blick was speaking to, and the demolition of City Hall was factored into and included into the acquisition of the GEHA building, so that will fund the demolition for that facility.
Zach, I have a question for you. With the added costs that the projections are, has there been any thought of doing away with the pool? Just our experience as a school district and then industry standards is whatever it costs to build a pool, within 15 years, you're going to experience that same cost through capital improvements and maintenance. Any thought about just doing away with the pool?
We have not had an involved conversation about that yet. We have, it really, and I don't say this to generate any sympathy, it took quite a bit of legwork to get to the figures that you're looking at tonight. And our thinking is based on the committee's thought process about funding levels. We would work backwards from that about what gets programmed into these facilities potentially.
Shannon, I had a question about the recreational center location. Has anyone ever thought about possibly redoing that instead of the square, which the parking would be atrocious for any type of tournaments, I would think? You know, think of Santa Calagon with all the cars and everybody parking in neighborhoods and grass parking. Of putting that possibly around the Nolan Fashion Square area that's now current dead zone with the emptying of Toys R Us, and it's already got the grading, it's already got the sewer. Yes, it would probably have to be updated, but it's 5 minutes from I-70 and Nolan. It's 5 minutes from 7 Highway and 40 Highway to get up in that area. You have existing places to eat. You've got restaurants within 5 minutes of that location. I'm just thinking that if we put a recreational center right down the street on the square, where would everyone park?
The plan that you're seeing has a built capacity for 200 additional parking stalls added into that. There was an additional rendering that added even more parking stalls, but parking stalls are what, $20,000 Yeah. I mean, easily starting cost of $20,000 per parking space, and that's probably up to $75,000. The staff is telling me per space. So this envisions 200 additional parking spaces being added as part of that complex. Your larger question about additional site selection, certainly that question is not without merit, but for purposes of this committee and this redevelopment plan, that's where the idea came from. So we haven't, kind of back to Mr. Pratt's question, we have not done a lot of work on feasibility studies or alternative site analysis. It's mostly come together around this idea of the square, but certainly hear your points, and they're well taken.
Well, I see the revitalization of the square. I get that. These are existing buildings, but when I called it the dead zone, as everyone here is all aware of, across the street's Kansas City. But the thing is, the site may be, I would think, cheaper by millions possibly, not having to grade. Yes, you'd have demolition of the current buildings there. I just remember as somebody that worked for Spirit Halloween for 15 years, how they chose their sites, Gordman's, Toys R Us, Kmart, and they did it for trafficking and not once did they ever say, let's get one of the locations on the square. It's just, and you know, there's a little bit of a dead zone across the street at 39th Street. There's a little bit of the dead zone with the closing of the JCPenney building, and I thought maybe they could possibly purchase these buildings, or I don't know if it's available for lease. That'd be a block and company question, but putting maybe the police shooting range there and the kennels and the other things they need. But the main thing is the parking is there and the grading is there. And again, you'd have to probably tear up the parking lots from somebody that's worked in those locations, but you've got that stuff done. And I understand you don't want to tear down an area and have a blank piece of grass over that area, but I would think somebody would probably analyze what it would cost to possibly move it to that location in the city. And
It certainly could be worked on.
thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Lucy. I think we've seen, though, with the problem that we had when the city tried to go in and demolish that area, how unwieldy of amount that developer wanted. I think it was $10 million just for the movie theater or something ridiculous like that. And so, although it sounds like a great idea, I want to build on what Mr. Pratt had said. And all of us that were on the tour saw our athletic facility that we would have. And to me, that would really build on the synergy of the sports and the outdoor sports. And I realize that we are going to talk about redeveloping the square, but I agree with Mr. Pratt that perhaps another site would be more appropriate.
I would just like to chime in for a second, and I want to thank everybody for their really well thought questions. And by no means do I want this statement to appear as if we need to move on from this discussion, because this is important. But I want to reiterate, as we begin the process here momentarily, or in a little bit, to move forward on how do we prioritize and rank the projects. I think that for the purpose of our discussion, the project we are asking to rank and rate is the proposed rec center on the square. And I think that while we could certainly look at all 78 square miles of the city and come up with our own recommendations, ultimately, I think, and I know I do see a few city council members in the room, and so if somebody wants to weigh in particular, that is certainly fine. But I think our task is to ultimately to give a thumbs up or a thumbs down to the recreation center project as it has been presented on the Independence Square. And again, not that it would be a bad use of our combined intelligence to think about where our community would be best served by a rec center. I think the information being given to us is, tell us what you think about an $85 million rec center package on the square, and that's where we will take our discussion as we move forward.
Michelle,
See.
here. Oh,
Please go ahead.
just a question, kind of looking back into the discussions regarding the closing of the water park. And I think there were like 3,000 memberships there
Yes,
that were
ma'am.
local.
That's correct.
And so I know a lot of those folks are looking for outdoor space or an outdoor experience. Does this new community center, would it offer or have the potential to expand into that type of space with the pool? So an indoor and an outdoor space similar to what we've seen in our neighboring communities.
Certainly, there could be the potential. The renderings that you view do not show that as an option. But certainly, these are just kind of initial design elements, so that could certainly be a topic of conversation. Just have to look at the site and the layout and how that would work as far as on that, on that site where the City Hall building is currently.
Also, a second question, I'm sorry. Second question is regarding the financial viability. How long would it take us, or is it projected for us to get to even a break-even point that we wouldn't be pulling from other?
No, we would never break even. So, and typically, I think I shared this 2 meetings ago, the target is about a 60% cost recovery. So we would be at, year one, we'd be at 62.3% cost recovery. So that's actually very viable, given your programming and I think I don't know if I shared this as well last time, but we would be looking at a high volume, low cost. The numbers I rattle off may seem rather high, but when you compare it to private, fitness facilities, I think they're fairly reasonable. But again, high volume, 2,000 plus people per day would be the idea, as opposed to 200 people a day at the Sermon Center. So pretty drastic change in our community center. So.
Yes, I have a question. It seems to me that, we've been through the police building. Seems to me that we ought to decide if that is by chance the number one priority. If it is, we ought to decide, well, what would the public pay for? What would they be willing to support in the way of, or the magnitude of, a police or justice center? Then we could start building on that to see, well, would the public support anything in addition to a justice center? Maybe a few streets or something else, but just how big an issue would we arrive at as possibly being supported? Remember, we have to get 57%. So I guess I'm suggesting, if we believe that the Justice Center is number one, maybe we should put our focus there first and see what level we would be comfortable in recommending to the council. And then, after that is done, look to see if there's any other items that could be added and still obtain public support.
I just
Larry,
wanted to
thank-
remind you also, they shared a few weeks ago, the recreation center had 67% support by the citizens. So I do think the rec center is a priority. I think it's already been told to us that it's a priority. So to me, the Justice Center and the rec center are the two biggest priorities. And then I just wanted to just make a comment about the location. The city already owns the properties on the square, so I just wanted to chime that in. Yeah.
Well, and then Doug, I think that might be a good time for a transition. I don't know if you think so, sir, but I think that's about what you're about to say.
Well,
I think you bring up a really good point. Go ahead, Doug.
Oh, yes, I was just going to agree, and I think Larry kind of pushed us into that direction, and that is thankfully what GK has come prepared to this meeting to help us facilitate and to hopefully start to develop among our group a consensus of what is that priority. And there may be things that we've seen and we've talked about with other people on the committee, and we may think, okay, that yeah, we have a consensus, but we need to kind of formalize that as a committee. So before I turn it over to GK to help to facilitate this, I never want in a meeting for anything to be lingering or hanging out there. And so within the scope of the Rec Center presentation and the Justice Center presentation for tonight, I'm on my third page of notes of the questions and responses from city staff. Is there anything else that's burning on anybody's brain to have answered about those two presentations from Zach before we move forward with our facilitation of looking at a consensus around community needs?
Randall Pratt, I guess another burning question I have is that the assertions have been made many times that the police building can't be repaired. It's just, I guess, a write-off. And I was impressed during the tour that the police department needs more space. I mean, they're jammed in that building. I don't question that. What I do question is that just because a sewer pipe is broken, you don't tear the building down. And it's an incredible wasted resource to tear down a building that could be repurposed or repaired, or an addition made to it. And the city does own land around there. If you tear down City Hall, it's across the street. You can vacate Memorial Drive and build across that right-of-way, or you can put a bridge over the top like a lot of hospitals do. So I haven't seen the numbers or analysis to say, oh yes, we need to spend $125 million compared to what can you build next to the police station. And just for some of the math, yes, it would cost $185,058 for inefficiencies without centralization, but just 4% on $125 million is $5 million a year of interest lug. And comparing $185,000 to $5 million, that's a big difference in terms of what it costs just for efficiency.
Randall, thank you very much for that question. And I think that is a very warranted and reasonable question, and I think falls in the category of how we start to move this discussion forward. And for example, and I wouldn't want to speak for anybody, but if this committee agreed that this project presented to us, the proposed Justice Center, as it's been presented at 23rd Street and Artie Mize Road, was not a good use of taxpayer money, including maybe some of the reasons that you brought up, then I think that would be part of our recommendation. Theoretically, we may give a thumbs down if we don't feel like it's a good part of it. So I think that's a critical conversation that we need to have now, moving forward into to ranking the projects. But again, I'll echo what I stated earlier, because there is the opportunity in my nonprofit world at Community Services League. We talk about mission creep, and sometimes that can mean that we get into things that we're not really designed to do. And I think that we could have a tendency of a committee to think about thousands of potential variables and alternatives to the plans that are presented. So I want to make sure that we stay focused, and our job is to give a thumbs up or a thumbs down recommendations related to the projects as they have been presented to us. And as a reminder, the three things we are being asked to present back to the council is, if the council is to issue put a issue before the voters, what would be the total amount of the bond package? What would be the categories included in the bond package? And what would be the level recommended in each of the categories? And that's where I think that our opinions about the projects and the merits and the viability of each of the sub-projects can be fleshed out. So I think the questions that we're starting to get into in the last 5 minutes, I think really are a beautiful part of the next phase of this discussion. So without belaboring it anymore, I think I'll turn it over to, because I think that's where the committee is leading right now, is I'll turn it over to GK to help get us moving in that direction of discussing the priorities.
All right, fellow committee, Jesus, loud, sorry guys. All right, fellow committee members. So we're gonna do what is called a very democratic sort of dot voting process. So first, we're gonna get into some small groups and have some discussion, so we don't jump right into this idea of voting, right? I wanna make sure that you can talk to your fellow committee members and you can look at some of the issues that are in front of us and kind of have a discussion. So we'll spend 5-10 minutes having discussion in small groups. In that time, we're going to put the issues around the room. Olson Studios is going to help me facilitate this tonight. And we're going to provide everyone with 3 stickers or dots to make a vote. Now, what I want you to understand is you can put all of your dots in one bucket if you want, or you can spread them out into the issues. But what we're trying to discern are there any issues that are going to fall below the priority line for now and be put on the sideline for something for later. It doesn't mean that this city will not address them or that they're not a concern for us or our community. It just means that they're not a priority for this ballot initiative going forward. So in theory, hopefully at the end of this first round, we will have some sort of consensus of things that we find as a priority to move forward and give a suggestion to the council. If that does not work out that way, I think then we come back together and we're going to have a deeper discussion of where we slash dollars to try to make sure everyone's priority is heard so that we can make that suggestion to the council. So we don't want people to walk away tonight feeling like their priority wasn't heard or they didn't get the vote they wanted. We really want to come to some sort of consensus. And so if that's not possible, we will end the meeting with a sort of next steps, and then the next meeting we'll have to come back to that idea of trying to get a consensus together as a group. So just to start, are there any questions about the process? I know I speak quickly sometimes. Great. So I think just naturally, not have to make people move a lot. If the 4 of you want to be in a group, the 4 of you want to be in a group, the 4 of you, the 3 of us, I think I would like to invite everyone to have, I'll set a timer for 8 minutes and we'll see where we're at, but I think we need to have a discussion. And what we're discussing is, if you look at the front of your packet you're given tonight, these are the priorities that we've been given. And are these the right priorities, or can some of these set out for this GEO bond?
I just, committee members, real shortly, I'm sorry, I know I've talked a lot tonight, but I just feel really compelled, just as someone that's been experienced with working with the city since when I was in high school and youth commission. I really hope you guys think about the future. I really feel like our town doesn't think about attracting people, keeping our people, and looking forward. And so I just hope you guys keep that in mind while you guys set your priorities. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle. All right, so I'm gonna start the timer. Please discuss amongst your peers on what we think are the priorities for the city. What? Yeah. I'm curious what your thoughts. Well, no, I mean like, well, so what we're trying to do is like, do we think we want to spend money on streets?
There's needs and wants.
Should I do like the clap once, clap twice? Do I have to? Who was a teacher in this room? No. So I'm really glad we're having some healthy conversations, and I really appreciate that. I want to re-explain this process one more time so that this is clear to everyone. So for this first round, you have 3 votes. And you can use those 3 votes on any of the issues that are taped up on the wall. You're going to actually get out of your seat and take your sticker and put it up there. So your vote is anonymous as much as it can be in this room, right? But if you really feel strong about one issue, you can put all 3 votes in that bucket. Or you can put 2 stickers in that bucket. So, we're just trying to decide which issues weigh the most for people in the room without having a huge, long, drawn-out debate. After we do the stickers, we're going to take a break so you can use the bathroom. There's some snacks. There's some water. Oh, is it coming? Oh, great. We're going to have pizza for dinner. Look at that, even better. Bearer of good news. So we're going to stand up here in just a second. You're going to take 30 seconds, whatever it takes you to walk across the room and make your votes. And then when you come back, we're going to tally them, and then we're going to have a discussion. We want to make sure everyone's heard. If someone's really upset about the way things are leaning one way or the other, we want to make sure we get that all aired out and that we can try to come to a consensus as a committee. Again, if this doesn't work, we'll try for another round, and we'll have a discussion. So I guess now's your time to get up and vote.
And GK, I would just add real quick, I'm gonna send Zach my 3 votes, and Zach's gonna vote on my behalf. So when you see Zach putting stickers, Zach is not stuffing the proverbial ballot box.
So lovely city pizza people. Where do we get the pizza? What do we do next?
So we have the pizza stationed out as you first come in with.
So the pizza's stationed out as you first come in on the desk. There should probably be plates and napkins out there. That's great. So if you want to then take a minute to get yourself a water, go get a pizza, use the restroom, we're going to take about a 10-minute break. So obviously you guys have eyes, so it doesn't really be a drum roll here. But if we just want to know where we came in for our votes, police headquarters, there was 15 votes for that. So that leads by a strong margin. Then our curbs and sidewalks, there were 8 votes for that. So that would be runner-up. We had a tie for third place. So community center, bridges, and culverts, animal shelter. And then street reconstruction came in, and then we had historic sites and parks improvement program. So that's kind of where we are in the voting scale. So I think the hardest thing we have to do is decide, do we want to talk about this until we run out of money for the GEO bond, and then decide to table those other issues? That's one way we can do it. Or we can decide to include all of the issues and reallocate the funds so that they don't all get 100% of what they're being requested for. So if we want to start with the first, the Olson Group helped us out. Now, remember in our packet, and let me see what page that's on. So, looks like page 15. Yeah, there's a breakout of how the money could be allocated. Yep, that's the page. And as you know on there, there's a low amount and a high amount. Now, if we go with the high amount, so we're giving everyone what they need, we're going to do the full Justice Center, we're going to really go at that 125. What we would get would be the police station, we would do curbs and sidewalks, bridges and culverts, and the rec center. And then we would be at our $250 million. And that's what we would be proposing to the city council. So that's one option. If we went low, we could add in the animal shelter and street reconstruction. And so this is where it becomes difficult. And this is where I don't know where you guys would come up and help me, of how we move to the next voting area for this. So.
Right. And so if you go on the low end even, and you still get the animal shelter and street reconstruction, if you can see and read my chicken scratch, it still brings you to 280. So you'd either have to decide, do you go over that 250, or do you start to lessen some of the allocations in those top ones? So that's another discussion point as well. So
I just have a question for clarification. If whatever we decide on right now, that this does not end the discussion, right, moving forward, I'm just concerned because we just learned a lot of new information tonight, and now we're voting right now. I just want to make sure we don't end the entire conversation.
And I don't think we have to leave tonight's meeting. I didn't expect to leave tonight's meeting with a hard decision, right? We're trying to move the needle forward. This committee has one more meeting. And so I also think it's taken into account that we are a recommending body. We're not actually making a decision for the city council. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a recommendation, and then the city council will have their own discussion and their own process of what they actually take from our recommendation. So I think that needs to be understood too. We're not actually making any decisions.
GK, if I could add in real quick, we all think about and process things differently. And one of the ways that I like to think about things is starting at the end and working backwards. If this is helpful to anybody, I would just offer, and I realize that this is a very utopian view of the world, but when ultimately, I believe that the last act of the committee is, well, other than adjournment of the committee, the second to last will be a vote on a consensus recommendation to the city council. It is my hope that there are up to 21 members of this committee, that if we are at our next meeting, it is my hope that we have worked through the discussion and the issues, that ultimately our vote is 21-0. And I say that to inspire a sense of working towards consensus, because the council, it is, if we were to call for some kind of a vote, and with 21 people present, I have no interest as the chairperson in trying to get a 12-9 vote to pass forward some sort of recommendation. I think if our community is going to see a vision and see us moving forward, I think we need to go to the council with a unanimous recommendation, and that hopefully will also inspire our fellow citizens and voters as they process a potential issue for the spring. So I wanted to offer that as just a pace-setting comment for as we consider our next steps in our discussion. But also, I would add that it is slated, and I think GK just addressed this, that we are slated to meet again, even though we are moving closer to some level of consensus. I don't believe that there is any intention, and I have no intention to call for a decisive vote on the priorities this evening. And my last comment is, and I realize we were not given these requests by the council in this particular order, but one thing that we might consider, the first question that was tasked of us was the total amount that we go to the voters with, to the council. And that may be a place for us to start is looking at some of the figures and figuring out what do we feel comfortable recommending. We know what the cost is going to be per individual based on what's been broken out. We know what that will be. So that may be something that helps us move forward in the discussion.
I think that's a great point, Doug. And so maybe we do shift gears and we look at the idea of money. And so, I think there's a big deficit in our community. Let's just put it that way. And so I think if we're going to go for a GEO bond and hope that it passes, right, by the citizens, that adding an extra 15 or 20,000 million dollars on top of this GEO bond request does not, it does a lot for our community, but it doesn't move the needle as far as taxes go very much. It's, I think, a few dollars. It's in the packet, so I don't have to speak out of, the air, but there's a number in there that you can see the increase is only a few extra dollars. I also think it's important when we had this meeting, Doug and I met with the city earlier to plan this meeting for tonight. One of the things that we need to understand is we're not going to pull all 250 or 275 million all at once, right? So the increase in taxes for our citizens or our fellow citizens isn't going to go up to $22 every month immediately. That'll be something that'll happen gradually over time. When Kansas City did this, they were paying cents on the dollar, and then there was then they were paying $1 and then $1.50, and then it slowly rose over the next 10 years or what until the bond got to the point where then it became the full $22 for the bond, and so it's not going to increase right away. So I think that's another thing to take into account. So I don't know if we want to do a show of hands or how we want to go about this or we want to have a discussion first, but are we comfortable with the 250 price, or would we consider as a committee suggesting that we raise that to another dollar figure? Now, I think Zach told us that the suggestion is to keep that below $300 million. And so in our packet, there's a number that's suggested there of 275. Is that something that the committee is comfortable entertaining? Or do we want to stay with the 250? And so now I'm going to open the floor, and this is a question for you guys.
GK,
I have your mic,
question.
sorry.
So I think it's the last page, page 18, that's in the packet. And it shows the incremental cost per $100,000 in home value with the rates that are applicable in Independence on property tax per mill. Do we know, say, if we're 250 million, that's $198.48 per 100,000. What is the tax load now? So the total tax bill of a $100,000 house, if we added this on top, typical in Independence with Mid-Continent Public Library and the county and the city, where does that put us for a homeowner that has a $100,000 house if we add $198 on top of it?
That's a good question. we don't have magic numbers, so it'll be just a minute. Yeah, so in the meantime, I mean, I feel like I'm getting some blank stares, and so are you interested at all in even having the discussion to increase? So I'm seeing some nods of yes. Okay, so is anyone, let's do this. Is anyone opposed to increasing to 275? Okay, that's there, I got a maybe. Is anyone else opposed?
I just think we've got a tough road to hoe, and that we need to make sure that our priority gets off on a successful foot. If we ask for too much, people won't look at anything at all. And so I think we have to, maybe before we think about the 275, kind of decide, we've got a sort of blueprint in place. I personally think, as much as I would like to have a rec center here, I think that's going to be the coup de grace, and it's going to kill the entire thing. I want to make sure we have a police building. That's my priority.
Well, and Zach, correct me if I'm wrong, or Doug, please, but I think this committee could decide to make a recommendation just to do the police building. The thing is, if we're going to make this effort to run this GeoBond tax, that we have a huge other deficit of things that need to be fixed in our community. Should we include those in the police building also? Is it wise for us to do this in one swoop instead of trying to come back to the voters in a few years?
I personally think the top three would resonate with the voters.
And so the top three, what she's speaking of here is how we
Yeah.
voted as a group, would be police, curbs and sidewalks, and bridges and culverts.
And the animal shelter.
See,
That's
and-
not the top three, but but no, I don't disagree with you. So that's what we can figure out, you know.
And see, I disagree. I mean, the residents spoke and they wanted a recreational center. So I don't agree with that. I'm sorry.
How long ago was that survey taken?
Over the summer, correct? It got the highest amount of votes. So if we're gonna get people to vote we need to get what the citizens want.
Dollar amount? I'm sorry, probably everyone wants one, but when they're faced with a dollar amount, do they revisit that? I don't know how it was phrased on the survey, but was there a dollar amount attached? Yeah, it becomes a different question
Hold on, we're
when you
gonna get an answer on that, I think.
attach money to it.
How many people actually answered total?
We had 500 plus, it was a Survey Monkey, it was for a limited time. It was early June. We extended it to about July 10th, I want to say. I think there was 525 or so folks who turned it on. So not a scientific survey by any means.
So out of 500, then how many voted for the parks?
Well, this was all related to the community center. Every question on that survey. But I would just remind the group, the 2002 Parks and Recreation Master Plan and the 2010 Parks Master Plan both called for a new community center as well. So this isn't a new concept by any means. So, and as far as the dollar amount reflected, I'd have to go back and check. I know the survey asked about what folks would be willing to pay for rates. So that was discussed in the survey, and we got responses on that. What kind of programs? That's where warm water aquatics. So, and I should clarify earlier the comment about aquatics, as opposed to the school district. This isn't lap lanes. This is warm water therapy aquatics. Learn to swim type aquatics. So a little different application than what the school district has. So, and that's what the residents wanted.
The other thing I think it's important to keep in mind is part of our goal here is we're pillars in our communities, like our local communities. And then when we leave this room and go back, the goal is that we're all happy with the decision we made collectively, and that we go back and we say, yes, this is a good thing, the community needs this, and we want to support it. If you don't feel that way, that's okay too. I'm just saying that I think that's the idea, is we want to have some sort of consensus. So, if there's someone in the room that's not saying what they want to say, now, this is the time to have these healthy discussions, Because if you walk away and go to your local watering hole and complain about this process and say it's awful, that's not going to help the vote go forward, right? And so, you know, I know this is a really tough thing to do. It's a lot of money. It feels like monopoly money. It feels kind of like play money. But these are decisions that are real decisions that we have to make as a community moving forward. I think we can say that we are 100% for the police station. I mean, is that something that we can kind of just say that that's something we want on this ticket? Does anyone feel opposed to that? Okay. So I think at least we know, again, we're not having a final vote tonight. We have another meeting to go over this. We'll have more discussion, but I think it's really healthy if we can just like say, yes, that is going to be on whatever we're doing moving forward. So I think what go ahead, Doug.
GK,
please.
I might add that maybe one thing that would help us continue to move the proverbial football down the field towards the end zone regarding the police station, and it sounds like we are moving close to consensus on that concept. Within that particular topic, there is, let us not forget that one of the questions asked of us was the money within categories, and perhaps a follow-up question now that we have consensus that the police would be part of our recommendation, the Justice Center. Perhaps some discernment around what dollar amount. Are we on the low? Are we on the high? Or are we somewhere on the middle? And because that may help us shape the overall size and scope of our total recommendation.
I think that's a great point to bring up. So again, this is an open floor discussion. So I'm, you know, go ahead, please.
I will just, I mean, I'm supportive of a police station. My concern is selling this to the community as potentially half the budget is going to that facility. And then if finding out that, oh, we're cutting historic sites or not putting a new park, you know, I'm concerned how that'll taste to the community with potentially half the budget is my concern.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very valid concern. One thing I would think about is I would probably try to avoid using the language cutting. We're not cutting the historic sites. We just, at this moment, we're not addressing them because they're not what we thought as the citizens is the top priority for our community with this dollar amount right now.
I think it's a continued trend that we continue to do as a city that I'm concerned about.
Yeah.
GK, two things that I would just answers to questions that were posed by the committee. The current assessed value or tax levy rate per $100 of assessed valuation is 47 cents, so 0.4759 cents per $100 of assessed valuation. There is a special benefit district for the Independence Square, and so their rate is 0.5755 per $100 of assessed valuation. I overheard a little bit of the conversation about the very specific survey that Morris mentioned. I would reference the 2023 Citizen Satisfaction Survey, which went to a representative sample of Independence residents, and the top 3 items that residents ranked, the question asked what their investment priorities were over the next 2 years. Those were listed as maintenance of city streets, enforcement of city codes, and police.
So back to Doug, unless you have a question, sir, please.
I don't have a question. When we go to the voters, they've just dealt with a property reevaluation. We just had a tax increase for police, which was approved. The county has another half-cent tax on the ballot in a couple weeks. How much stomach will voters have for another tax increase? So it's one, how much more are they willing to shell out? And secondly, what would that be for? If I looked at the revised Justice Center the lower cost one, of 96 million, it's under 100 million, and that doesn't seem nearly as high as 101. I mean, the grocery stores tell us that. 99.99 looks a lot less than $101. So I think we really have to give a lot of thought to how much can we get people to pay for, no matter how critical the need. I don't think they're going to vote based upon the need as much as how much they're willing to pay. But, and that probably differs by people. So maybe we ought to have some kind of discussion what you think your neighbors and friends in various parts of town would likely do. Out where I live in District 3, we probably would vote for a lot more than people in District 1 and 4, and even 2. So I just offer that.
No, I think those are great words to listen to. I think you make a really good point. I think back to what Doug spoke about earlier is what our goal is for this group is to make a recommendation on what we think are priorities and not try to get in the weeds and concern ourselves fully with the marketing and the voting strategy and the tax and all. I think that's getting too far. I think that's for another committee. I know there's a marketing committee that's going to help with this. There's a whole consulting group that's here that's going to help the city think through, is this the time to run this ballot initiative? I think we just need, this is hard because it's a lot of gray area, but to stay on focus, what are our recommendations if the city and the council members decide to go down this route? And so I think everything you said is very valid, but we need to kind of decide, are these the priorities we think in this room we want to suggest potentially to move forward with? I think how the city moves forward, that's a different conversation.
Do we know what the levy increase would be for each of these dollar amounts? So what does 300 million equate to as far as a levy increase?
Come back to me.
Hardball tonight, Zach. All right, so we'll pin a pin in that question. Danielle, please.
One thing I'd just like to point out, I feel this committee is maybe lacking in age diversity because I think maybe just looking around and just from what I know personally, I think there's only 3 of us that have kids, like young school-age kids. And people don't stay in independence. You know, I look at the people I graduated high school with, my high-achieving friends, they left Independence for Blue Springs, Lee Summit, the Northland. And they left because they felt it was the best decision for their families. And I feel very strongly that our city has not been focused on our future and what's best for the future instead of what's best for us right now. And so I really, again, I'm just urging you guys to think about that and what's going to attract people to stay and what's going to attract people to come. And I know just I'm going to be very passionate about this recreational center. I was lucky. I grew up in the YMCA, and I have very, very good memories of the YMCA. And I'm sad my 3 kids don't have something like that, and they would love to have something like that. And so, the groups that I'm around are a lot of families with school-age kids, and a rec center is going to be a priority for these families. And we need to think what's going to be attractive to the voters, you know, and what's going to impact them directly. So that's my 2 cents.
All right, so go ahead, please.
I was going to say, for those that don't remember, I work at Jackson Hewitt at 35th and Nolan, and I have roughly, give or take, 300 clients at my desk, of which 70% predominantly are Independence residents. And then I have other clientele from my home Anyway, the number one complaint, absolutely number one complaint for this last tax season, without a doubt, was the Jackson County property tax increase. I mean, even there were people that were moving out, and people that I talked to, so this is going to be a hard sell from what everyone has said. So, I mean, that, every year I get the number one complaint, and this has definitely been at Jackson County and the way they screwed over and got all this extra money. And, you know, that money's flooding in now. So we're getting that extra income in now that wasn't possibly expected from the 23 revenue, 22 revenue, et cetera, et cetera. And going back to what she says, I understand what you're saying about the recreational center. I put it on the needs and the wants. I would love everything to go through. Everyone wants a dog kennel. There's not a thing on here that I think's stupid, not one thing. But you see what passed mostly was the needs. And I am in agreement with the recreational center, but when we opened Super Splash, not Super Splash, or what's our water park? Venture Oasis, because Super Splash closed in Raytown. I had a pool in my backyard when I moved to Independence back in '90. But I drove my kids to Super Splash because they had slides, they had the deep pool, they had the diving boards, they had the other stuff that they could do. Then we opened Adventure Oasis after they closed down. And then the residents around this area that I, again, do tax returns for, all areas of the city, they really, really liked Adventure Oasis. I miss the closing of the Adventure Oasis talk or whatever it's going to do. But again, that's limited. You have limited revenue. You only have so many weeks because they've shortened the school. Weather permitting, you lose the last 2 weeks of August that used to be open past Labor Day. So it's a revenue thing, and I get all that. So, and with the YMCA, most of the time when I went to the YMCA, it was for a kids' party that was right by the post office. And the kids would want to swim. Of course, there were people that was easy, but then we had the Planet Fitness, we had the gym, Genesis that I go to. I go to both Planet Fitness and Genesis. Genesis has a pool, and so I enjoy that pool up there, and I enjoy the prices. That's very affordable for me. I get in on a special program anyway, but so I get what you're saying. You make a very valid point for that rec center. I just, in my opinion, that's why I'm not in favor so much for it right now. I say we need it, but I just don't like where they're trying to put it and the amount of money that's attributed to that. So again, that's my 2 cents. Somebody that sits across Independence residents, looks them in the face and hears their complaints. So
Zach has some answers to questions, and then we'll get to you.
Page 16 of your packet shows it's titled, "How much will it cost?" And at the various intervals down below, that shows what the levy, the city portion of the levy would increase. So like I told you a minute ago, we were 47 cents. A $250 million issue is going to increase it by 105. As reference, I can't tell you the total levy rates in other communities, but I can tell you their city rates. Blue Springs is at 60 cents. Grain Valley's at about $1.15. Grandview at $1.20. Lee Summit at $1.30, and Kansas City at $1.45, the portion of Kansas City and Jackson County. I rattled off a lot of numbers, so if anybody wants me to repeat any of that.
We'll get it on tape.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Lucy, Doug, if you look at the board, if you remove the recreational center, it totals to the second bottom half that was not selected as the top 4. You could literally do everything in there for the 275, I think. GK, would you check that math, please?
Yeah, one of us will here. 1 second. Yeah. Well, so I think that's a really, I like what you just pointed out. I'm seeing a lot of good heads nodding around the room. I want to go back to what Doug brought up a few minutes ago. One of the things we have to decide moving forward is on these numbers, are we okay with the high? Is that where we're looking at? So if we're going to go forward, we're going to do it all in? Or do we want to find somewhere in the middle or go to the low? I mean, this is where the decisions becomes difficult, right? And so I think if we're going to go for it, we should just do it the right way and go for the high. Does anyone disagree with that? Again, this is not a final decision this evening. We're just trying to move the needle forward. Okay, so I got some yeses and I got a disagree. So. But I think for the next meeting, we can provide this in a list form so we can think about it. I think it's something we can provide ahead of time. I mean, we're gonna have, after tonight, to sit on some of this and sleep on it and think about where we're at. But, you know, I do want to point out that we really only have one more meeting together as a committee on the book scheduled. So I know there's some tough decisions to make here. I don't know, which one are you gonna go first? You're both grabbing, so.
I was just gonna say, when, the lady from Jackson County that helped with their go bonds, she was talking about the animal shelter, and that was what helped. Okay, we need to use what's gonna help us to get the rest of it through. And I think everybody, you know, that's something that everybody loves their pets, and they want that fixed, and I think if you throw that in there, you're gonna help a lot of people that might be on the fence otherwise.
Just to the point earlier about removing the recreation center completely, on the high end, that would bring you to 255 on the high end, and then 226.5 on the low end.
Again, we're not, I don't think Doug and I's role here is to try to strong arm you guys into making decisions, but I'm seeing a lot of like good looks around the room. And I think one of the most, and I know there's people who are very passionate about it, but one of the most contentious things on this list is the recreation center. I know when I talk to my fellow neighbors that that's one of the things that they're really, you know, very strong about, that they don't want to put a tax on for a recreation center. Not that they don't want a recreation center, they just don't want to, you know, pay for it basically. You know, and so this is the hard part of the committee, and then I'm gonna let you talk, is that we have to make the decision. I mean, do we say get rid of the recreation center for this go around and do all the things we need to improve, have the animal shelter, and then have the new police station? Is that what we're leaning towards?
I want to say this. I want to phrase this with I'm not showing support for something. I'm in support of the police and all this stuff. My concern would be with talking about the pets and everything. We had the pets and police tax. We had the recent tax increase for the police. All those things are good, and I'm supportive of that. I think for the way I'm feeling right now is there's a lot of new information presented tonight. And then to sit here and try to recommend the top 5 things is really difficult when, you know, I'm in support of a recreation center and all these other things. I'm really hesitant to put a vote onto, you know, where we're at. I will just speak up and say 2 of the things I voted for are the bottom 2 on the list. As a father with small kids, we visit the parks a lot. And so, you know, again, like what Danielle said, we're a very small sampling of where this community is going to sit. And so I know we have our strong opinions and our strong feelings. I'm really hesitant with what I've learned tonight to where I could voice my full support.
And Doug, he brings up a good point, and maybe we need to have some time to chew on this a little bit. Maybe for tonight, we need to think about having a wrap up and coming back to this conversation after we have time to process all this information. And I would agree with you. I drive to Blue Springs to go take my dog to the park. I don't use independent parks very often. And so I understand what you're saying.
So for those who feel strongly about a recreation center, I think the problem we will run into if we recommend it in April is, just listening here, there are a lot of unresolved questions about it. There's questions about, is it going to be designed to bring in tourists or out of town money to support the square? And if so, that recreation center is not designed to do that. If it's a community center, perhaps it's not going to do much for the square either. and at the same time, it's on a very expensive site. And there may be other better locations in the community that would give it a chance of paying its way. To generate $3 million a year in fees from our residents, it seems like a lot. That's a stretch. I don't know, and if we can't do that, the general fund does not have the money to support any kind of deficit. And we don't want to have a big problem on our hands that we built something that the community all of a sudden has a huge problem with. So, and if it were to go on the square, it's going to be 3 or 4 years before the site could even be prepared. So there's a lot of time to work through all these questions. I do know when you go out with a bond issue, a bond proposal, citizens will ask questions we've never dreamt of. You have to have this thing really, really thought through. You have to have answers that make sense to them. That doesn't exist right now for a community center on the square. We cannot answer these questions. And if that's involved in the bond issue and you can't answer the question, the whole thing tanks. They'll vote the whole thing down. So the recreation center is probably just not it's too early. We're not, if we go in April with a bond, I think the recreation center can't get passed because we don't have a good enough handle on it.
But I'd just like to remind you guys, this was the thing that had the most amount of votes on the survey, 67.
335 people out of a population of how many? That's
126,000.
Yeah, with no money attached.
Well, the general idea of a recreation center sounds good. It sounds like we would all want one. It would be great for the community. But when you go ask people to approve $80 or $90 million for one, all of a sudden, they want to know everything about it. That it's been thought through, and it will not create problems that the community has to then later try to deal with.
I think it should be a standalone option.
One thing we need to think about is the Royals. The Royals changed their plan 15 times with no definite structure of where they wanted to move the stadium.
Piss people off.
And that's exactly what it did. And so their rush to do it, I think, cost them being able to do it. And I think we need to have all our ducks in a row. We got to know, okay, this is the best site. This is not the best site, and give it some time. We're not saying we don't want it. We're just saying it needs to be planned out. And right now, maybe there's other things and there's more information needed than what we have.
So here's my question. I just want to take a moment to pause. We have a half an hour left on the time. We do not have to continue going in circles, but if you're finding this conversation healthy, we have time to have the conversation. Olsen Studios and I talked. I think what we need to do is process all the information we've been given. We need to think about the new numbers. I think we need to, Doug and the team and I will probably meet before the next meeting and decide how we'll structure the next meeting. But I think coming back to this voting process and trying this another time around or another 2 times around until we kind of get things distilled down is probably going to be one of our best approaches to the process. But I don't think we don't have time to do that now. I think we need to process this information and think about things. So if you want to continue this conversation, this is your group. We should do that. But I think we can also put a pin in it and take a breath and then come back at the next meeting.
I would like to add for some additional context that I do think that while this committee has 3 specific questions that we are providing a response to the city council to, I think like any advisory committee, that is I believe our official title is advisory committee, we have the latitude to add, give advice and advice and counsel. And while I don't want to necessarily pick on this particular discussion around the community center, it is right now at least the topic that we are on. As I hear both sides, I think that again, I'm bringing this forward in the hopes of reaching us closer to consensus. It doesn't appear necessarily that we have people that are adamantly opposed to the concept of a rec center, but rather the hesitation is around the thoughtfulness of the plan, the financial viability. So to that, I would add that there may be an opportunity for us to codify that into a formal recommendation to the council with some sort of an asterisk behind it, with certain conditions that, and I'm speaking off the cuff here, but it could be the recommendation of the advisory committee that the council proceed with a bond issue related to the community center after certain tasks are completed. And that sort of allows us to address both things. One, our overall support for the concept and need in the community, but second, also addressing the many comments that were brought up that there are many details that have not yet been shared, or I shouldn't say been shared. They have been very shared by city staff. They may not have been fully thought through yet. As Larry said, there may be a lot of unanswered questions regarding that potential project.
And
There-
it is still, one of the top things that was voted for. So I think the people most passionate are the only ones really speaking up about it as well. So.
And I'd just like to add, when the council selected the committee members, they took into account whether or not they had children or if they were grandparents. And all of us that are grandparents really are concerned about our grandchildren and hopefully staying here. Where a lot of the problem is not the lack of a rec center, but the lack of good paying jobs.
So
Please.
maybe what would be helpful to me and perhaps the committee is, since we have a little bit of time and we have the chief here, could we learn more about what is proposed in this Justice Center? We have two different versions, one 125 million, another one is 96 million. It used to be 50 million. What is going on here and what is it we are even thinking about?
Yeah, I can't speak for the chief, but I think he's happy to get up and have that conversation while we're here. You gonna go to the podium?
Well, thank you, Mr. Blick, and yes, happy to answer any questions. So what Zach proposed earlier, the 96.5 million, is the Justice Center in concept without the included functionality. So the K-9 portion that would be off here, it's probably good for the committee's sense I answered Mr. Pratt's question he thoughtfully posed during the tours about the site, and he reposed that tonight, so I think probably it's a good starting spot. During the tours, he talked about, and again tonight, about the site that is City Hall and where the police station currently sit. That is just over, roughly, just for argument's sake, about 7 acres. If you go back to the city manager's presentation, if we were to go and encompass Nolan Road and take the Sermon Center lot and the Pearl, the old Pearl, now just a park facility, but used to be the Pearl fueling station back there, it was just over 11 acres. The tract of land that you sit on currently here is 14 acres. The Justice Center, if completed in totality at the $125 million valuation, is 14 acres fully developed. So when he had asked this question, I went back to our owner's rep, which is Project Advocates, and we tried to limit that scope of if we touched building to building and reduce this down. Obviously, in a perfect world, there's some really unusable grading off the backside of IPL here, where there's trees, and just it would be an absolute nightmare to actually make that usable. that we could get maybe, if we're lucky, to 13 acres. And that is literally no function, no movability throughout, but everything is touching and condensed in. So no matter what, the space, even if you encompass the Pearl fueling station over there and took over Nolan Road, is not enough to centralize and consolidate operations for the Justice Center, to bring over municipal court, all of those functions that would be included in this land in that space. So I think that's important just to point out. Next is what would be included. So where you sit currently, this first floor would house special operations. Their immediate functionality would be on this side of the building as it currently is. Where you sit now, there will actually be a building that connects and just to kind of give you the kind of the foreshadowing here, when we present on the 28th of October to the City Council during that study session, we'll have schematics and everything. So you'll see all this going together. Oh, never mind. You're getting ready to see this coming together here very shortly. You really are playing hardball tonight and on point, I might add. Not just because you signed my paycheck. So, okay, all right. Now, as far as plugging in HDMI cords, not so much. That's not an HDMI connection, sir. That is an HDMI connection. There we go. Got it. All right. So you'll see the site plan as it's laid out. Perfect. Okay. Where we sit, to orient you, the yellow police building, as Vanna is making her way to the board, the proposed building looks up there. There we go. Oh, even better. Okay, so we're sitting here in the pink, yes, pink/red. This is the addition. What that will be, so I talked about this space. This is where those two buildings overlap. So this, where you are seated in the back, will be blown out and added on, okay? We will connect that L. That will be the new, as you think about the facade, the new records function, the police entrance, so where the public interfaces with the police department is in this corner right here. And moving beyond that, on this level is the municipal court. So that is everything having to do with court, as well as the youth court function, all of the court staff, and all of that functionality is over on that side, which takes us all the way out to Artie Mize here. Underneath of that, so below that grade, is the detention facility. Currently, right now, go ahead. Sure. You know what? See, here I was talking about an HDMI cable, and this isn't even tethered to a cord. So you can dock me $1 for that one. I'll put it in the jar. Okay, so everything here is the municipal court up top. Underneath down here is the detention. Currently, right now, our detention facility is in police headquarters, which we talked about on the tours. We are having to bring people that are in custody, demanded to be in court, or vice versa, people that are come to court and are remanded by the judge into custody. We are having to take them out into the public space, across the street, across Memorial Drive, through the police lobby, and then down into detention. Vice versa, when they bond, there is no bonding function, which we are one of the only police departments around that still operate in that function, that don't have a bonding facility out of their detention facility, just because it's, again, smooth transition in, smooth transition out. All of that will be done over here. So this will be the new bonding location, the public parking that comes in here. As you think about flow, you will access, our officers will come in through a secured entrance here, loop around, and come into the Sally Port, which is here. So detention underneath, municipal court over here. This is the training facility that we are currently utilizing, facilities like the Sermon Center and other things for our applicant testing. It also has the actual workout gym in here. The back portion of this is a training, all of our training staff and training offices, as well as the training room, which we can host classes, community classes, engage with all of our public-facing operations there. Behind this is the firing range down here, which talks about proposed building. Again, part of that high end and low end, while the city manager talked about the challenges of that, when we had that discussion, I would tell you from my perspective, that's not, as I told them, that's not really a feasible option. I would much rather not build vehicle bay buildings than I would not have the liability associated with a firing range, which is what we are required to do. As far as case law and liability, I would much rather take on, if we're talking about risk assessment, an asset like a vehicle getting damaged that we can replace, not replace, look at replacing somewhere in the future and explain that than I would about the fact that we're not adequately training our personnel. And it just is not reality for us and a department our size to engage for any length of time with another department. We would have to find some facility, private facility, that would take on the liability of what we do for training and how we train, and that would be the challenge. So this, as it sits now, is our communication center. And to orient you, it's literally right outside that window. So I know this looks expansive, like we are really, really going, but it really is tucked in. This is the communication center. Here's a parking lot for that. These are vehicle bays. They are Morton, designed as Morton type metal buildings. So we're able to cut costs there. Along with this is a detention pond for all the impervious structure that would be added to retain that water that's here. Parking for all of our evidence cars. And then back here is where I talked about, this is the K9 building, also a metal building type. With the dog runs, indoor, outdoor dog runs for our K9, along with this secured fenced-in area for their training that they currently have at their facility. And then this is that unused track here between the parking lots where we sit right behind here and below. All of this is a flow loop, traffic in and out you can see, but I hope that at least orients you a little bit. Go ahead. Okay.
So to further answer your question about what's the difference in the high and the low number that you were provided tonight is effectively just doing the renovations to this building as it sits and adding the police court detention facility. That doesn't get any of these outlying buildings in that number. It does, however, grade the entire site and install all the utilities for the entire site. So at later phases, it's basically a phasing option. So when we get around and have the funds to do these outlying buildings, everything's ready to go. We can start pouring foundation and build because everything's there. The high-end number includes all the grading work, everything you see here. The only change would be scaling this training facility back and trying to include it in the main facility just to take that one building down. But yeah, so that's all the outbuildings, less the one, or just renovations to this facility with the addition of court, PD headquarters, and detention.
So when we toured the building, there was a shortage of locker rooms and assembly facilities and mustering, ready to go out on shift. Where does that take place?
Yeah, so there are 2 locker rooms. So one set of locker rooms is right here in this corner on this addition where it meets, male and female. We did have a separate set of locker rooms in here, so if that is off the table, along with when we can incorporate our staff, the training staff, we'll just office them or cubicle them up here. We would still have to go to Sermon Center or Truman Memorial somewhere to do our physical agility testing, but we're going to have to incorporate the weight room facility and workout area in here. Also, the training room would go away, so we wouldn't have a lot of that community-facing function piece of that from that side of it. But there is another set of locker rooms that are in here. So these are temporary lockers. These aren't the ones like you saw, the big full-size equipment. All of that is here. We're coming specifically to do physical training, defensive tactics training, workout. So somewhere that would have to be flowed over in here. But there is enough lockers in here for us, not only for current, both male and female, but future growth staff in both.
Now, where is the secure parking for employees and city police vehicles?
This whole entire site is secured. It's all fenced in. There's access. Public is only here along this side. There's a gate here. There is an entrance and a gate here, and an entrance and a gate. There's another one somewhere. One more. Oh, up there, right here, off of this parking lot.
It looked like all of those are buildings. Where is the police parking?
These are all parking lot here. This is parking here. There's parking here, although if that goes away, I don't know if we'll have that lot, but there's parking here as well. So all these where you see stalls and islands are parking, public parking for court, is all here. Court staff is in here in their own secure lot. Parking with handicap is here. And then again, if the gym were there, that would be public parking there. And then parking for that facility. So the whole concept idea is how the employees, the public initially, how you come in and interface with the facility. Whatever your needs are, you do so in a flowing manner, either this way or that way. From the staff side, how you would access the building is if you were coming in and your office is here, you know, or you were coming in and going to the gym there, the range down here, you're going to park and go where you go based on the flow of the facility. Same with the administrative and investigative portions. They would come and park up here because they office over here. Sorry. Go, Dana.
I didn't write down on the notes. I know when it was built, the original building, it could house 150 police officers, and now we could have up to 230. But what was the amount of employees that?
330 total. So
330 total.
yeah, it's actually 332 as we sit here is the total authorized. So we have 230 sworn and another 102 civilian positions.
And then how many back in 1974 did we have? Do you know?
Don't know on the civilian side. It wasn't very civilianized. You had commissioned officers that crossed over into dispatchers, and so I know we were able to get from records that we had when I asked that question early on. We were able to get to 150 officers at that time. I don't know how much civilian staff we had.
Thank you.
Randall Pratt. So I'm going to talk a little bit about human nature. Not that I really like what I'm going to talk about. So the first thing is people are motivated by fear. So I don't think they'll be motivated by this picture. Very few of our citizens will ever go in the back hallways of this building. And I hope I'm never in handcuffs and going there. So my quality of life is not going to be made better by this. So people will say, we got to vote for this because maybe we won't have a policeman come answer my 911 call. Aren't we? We're motivated by fear to do this. And people are motivated by shiny objects. I think we have to include a lot of these items because people will focus in on what they want. So if you like a dog, you love dogs, you're going to look at the animal shelter. If you have small kids, you're going to look at the parks. And it's the shiny objects. That's why they put the Kauffman Center in the same tax increase as they did the stadium complex. Because some people don't care about going to an athletic game, but they care about the arts. So I'm just saying that if we want to appeal to human nature. Another item of human nature is that we love to use debt and credit. We do that in our federal government. We have way too much consumer debt on credit cards. And it's hard to say to people, be careful of debt because what you spend today is money you cannot spend tomorrow and becomes a burden in the future. Zach, I'm not sure, I follow all the numbers, but 275 million, I think that's a 31% increase in the property tax. I think that's what it is. Look at the numbers. Some ways that were presented may have been more than that. But that's a big lug for people. And there needs to be enduring value. I put this table out. You've seen it before by email. There are some things that I think are absolutely justified by a GO bond. If it has long-term enduring value, if it really makes life better, yeah, it's worth doing. It's like buying a home. I will buy a home. My life will be better. And my home should last decades. It should last longer than mine. I'm alive. And I think that's justified. But if I'm going to go take on debt to go have a nice meal in a restaurant, that's not wise use of funds. And some of these things that like a street overlay, I don't think that's 30 years or 20 years. I think we'll be paying for it. You'll have to tell me. But we have to be careful about spending money for things that ought to be funded out of our budget. If I can afford in my budget to go have a nice meal, that's okay. But if I can't afford that, I shouldn't take on debt to go do that. So those are my thoughts.
I had a quick question for Chief. Are we going to have a substation around the back where it is? I love the one at the center. People forget that it's there, but it's good that everything's going to be here, but the northwest portion of the city, is that I know it's not in any of our budget or plans, but what is your thoughts on something like that?
So we will have a presence. We're currently in process of probably looking, if this is approved in concept for us to move, we would move a little further east, kind of like this is moving a little further east, and we would take up a space on the square. So in other words, Inglewood would move to the square, Helps with Santa Calagon, especially with the police department not being there. So it gives us a permanent residency there to interact with visitors and other people there. We have the Independence Center substation, again, just renovated at no expense to the city. No, that's not no expense. We did the card readers, access, things like that. But the center spent almost $150,000 to renovate that space, which was phenomenal. So that's in use. We also have 2 officers that are currently permanently officed out of our Hawthorne Place apartments to give them a physical presence, office presence there. They work out of there. And none of that will change. So we will continue to have those satellite locations staffed, but none of those are receiving. They are just workspaces for those individuals, but we will have those spaces there. And again, I know just for the detention piece of that, because I think there was some confusion or misconceptions. That is by far, as Zach alluded to, the most expensive piece of this entire puzzle to build and construct, the requirements and the industry standards. However, I want to reiterate, I'm really, really impressed and proud of our design team, both internal from the PD as well as the architectural firm and our owner's rep that really, and Lisa and Rich and all the people from the city, we really brought people to the table and really tried to define. So our capacity as we sit today is 27. If we were fully at capacity in our detention holding facility as we sit today, that is with 14 cells. That's as we went through the tour, I told you about the corridors, and that is not industry standards. We added 5 additional cells, which is planning for 50 years in the future. So 5 cells, 14 here today, 19 in this facility, and our capacity goes from 27 to 44 just by layout design. So that it's really, we did think of those, but it's not extravagant. There is not, we didn't just throw in 30 cells because that was an arbitrary number. So, you know, for what it's worth, there's not fluff in there. It is usable, functional space that we are programmed currently doing. We're just doing it on top of each other.
I'd like to chime in for a minute, one, because it's approaching that time. We already extended the time, so in an effort to not get thrown out of town, I'd like to move us closer to adjournment for the evening, but with clear next steps. Before I talk about that, I do want to, even though I do serve in a short term as the chair of this committee, I want to voice my support for the full $125 million of the Justice Center. And I would just add a couple of quick bullet points to amplify my support. I believe that the original concept for this new Justice Center location goes back at least to 2018, and if not earlier than that. And I would imagine, while I wouldn't suggest it would be a majority, I think there would be a handful of people in our community that would probably say, oh yeah, aren't we going to build there? Or isn't that coming soon? I think it's been in the public dialogue. And while I know that we've had this slightly clunky run up to getting updated numbers, I think that the project still has been very well thought through, discerned, and planned. I think of all of the projects, this one is probably at one of the more refined stages in terms of being ready to move forward. I think it's also worthy to note that the Justice Center project would, I'm not a construction expert, but we're still looking at 2 to 3 years down the road before anything would happen between a vote and ultimately moving in. So, there's a need to move forward. And I think that just from thinking things through on a project like this, to me, leaving portions undone and uncompleted, leave them lingering would make me feel, as my kids like to say, it's so satisfying to watch. Like when you pull Velcro and things like that, it's so satisfying. To me, it would be so unsatisfying to go 75% of the way, but think, oh gosh, we still have these extra hanging projects. So I'm belaboring the point, but I just wanted to share a couple of my opinions. And I say that because I think we are moving forward towards consensus of the Justice Center being the central point of our committee's recommendations. And so I would suggest to all of you, I think that's a good place for us to start what will likely be our last meeting. And I'll ask before we leave that Zach help share and remind the details of that next meeting. But if we look at the Justice Center piece, having been reached consensus tonight, we then can further explore, and it's clear that we need to spend a little bit of time on our own reflection or talking to other people on the committee or out in the community about the Rec Center project and some of the other projects. But we've all been on many boards and committees, so I don't need to remind you of this, that we are in what I like to call the messy middle, where this is, we're in this, we're like, hi, gosh, how are we going to get to a point? We will get there. We will talk. We will bring forward new ideas, new discussion. We will get to a point where we have consensus. And I just want to thank all of you for your patience as we kind of work through making sure that all voices are heard as we move closer towards getting some consensus. But it will be my recommendation that we start next time, probably with the affirmation of where we see the Justice Center budget, either at the 96 or the 125, and that we affirm that. And then we work from there to fill out the rest of our recommendations and get a draft. We get a draft set of recommendations that we would ultimately take to the council. So thank you for indulging me in a couple of minutes and comments around that. And again, I want to be very upfront in saying to city staff who have worked so long and hard and stay long and extra for these meetings away from their family, we are thankful for you in doing this work. So at this point, I would ask that maybe Zach offer any final comments and reminders about our next meeting.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next meeting is October 30th, right back here at 5:30.
It's a costume contest, right?
I think so, absolutely. Doug, I may just, let people know, I tried to take some good notes on some of the requests that were made tonight, but it is my intention to get to this committee in advance of your next meeting. Answers to the question about properties that currently fall into a tax abatement area and the impact on them of a increase in the levy. I will summarize the marker board voting results over there and send that out to the committee so you can contemplate and ponder on that more. I also thought it might be helpful to send both the levy impact analysis, Dr. Hurl's question, as well as some of the salient points from the most recent citizen satisfaction survey, which again goes to a lot more people citywide. So if that's appropriate, I'll intend to, and let's be real honest, it'll be Heather who's the magician that gets that out to you. But we'll get that sent to you in advance of your next meeting. Is there anything else that would be helpful for the committee to?
Zach, I do have one comment. As we've spoken about the different projects, has there ever been any discussion that if there would be two different ballot questions? So if we split it out, all of the projects except for the rec center, and then an additional project where if people felt very strongly about a rec center, then they could vote yes on the second question.
We discussed that question with our city attorney, and I'm going to give the qualifier first, and then I figured out a way around him. He cautioned to us as city staff to be reluctant to speak on that because when you're talking about how the ballot questions are posed, you're really contemplating what you think will give these issues the greatest chance of success, and as staff were precluded from advocacy. So, but what he didn't tell me I couldn't say is that if you'll recall, the Charter Commission made a recommendation to the council. The council then worked to break those down into different questions, ended up being 5. So there is nothing that says this has to be presented. There's a multitude of combinations up there of ways this could be framed to the community.
I just guess my thoughts on this. Some people will feel very strongly about certain aspects of this. Why not give people multiple ways in which to express whether they want to do something or not? And at times, just in my experience, sometimes that actually increases the likelihood of the main issue that you want to pass. Somebody may say no to one or maybe two, but they'll still come back, at least say yes to one of the issues.
Yes, sir. Doug, I have nothing further.
All right. Again, thanks to all of you. I would ask that you spend a little time in contemplation before our next meeting. And I have no doubt how this next measure will end, but I will ask, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
You got it.
All in favor of adjournment for this meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you for your time, and we will